Our fourth speaker in this series is Ksenya Samarskaya. Ksenya is a strategist and creative practitioner who's focusing on many typographic endeavors and pedagogical endeavors as well. She is especially interested in regenerative futures. She also has, been wearing multiple hats in the industry. She has been the managing director of the Type Directors Club, TDC, the board member and the US country delegate of ATypI, Association Typographique Internationale. She has been the member of the Alliance Graphique Internationale, ATypI, and participant of the Inscript Collective. I'm really excited to have you part of this series and can't wait to learn from you. As people start trickling in, I'll give you the mic back and let's do this.
Amazing. Thank you again so much for inviting me. And I just want to restate how inspiring everything has been with this series that you started, the curation, the thought that you put in down to the small details. And I'm really excited with what you've done and what you are doing here. And it is an especial honor to be part of these conversations. So
thank you so much.
Very privileged to be in this room. I'll start with, I guess what makes sense to start with, which is just a hop along, kind of abridged introduction to myself, and kind of my career and my work practice, so people in the room can kind of understand the directions that I'm coming from, and then I'm hoping to save the kind of majority of the space for discussion and conversation, because I feel like I got really good prompts in terms of what Hello Departures is thinking about, and I feel like there's a lot of fruitful things that we can perhaps uncover and discover together. My name is Ksenya Samarskaya. I tend to work under Samarskaya and partners because, as you'll see, a lot of the work is collaborative and cross-disciplinary in nature, and we use salt and pepper as a metaphor a lot, which you'll see in this kind of interactive effect, because the practice is, well, very broad and spanning, is deeply rooted in typography, and I like the metaphor that typography is kind of like salt and pepper in terms of it forms the base layer of the seasoning and the flavoring that you need, so it is something that is important to know and understand. And so yeah, we are one of the, I guess now I'm becoming known for other things, but for a while it was primarily type design. This is from a typeface called Wyeth, which, like many of my projects, are in kind of perennial, perpetual pre-release. They live completed on a hard drive somewhere, which is, I think, something that happens to type designers a lot. This is from Simoldes, which is a typeface that we did as a 3D typeface, an experiment, because that's the other part of my practice that goes way back in terms of experimenting with technology, with speculative futures, with diving deep into history and trying to connect it in terms of where are we going as in design, as designers, as practitioners, as a culture, and what are the possibilities and what kind of roots do we have. Like I said, a lot of this work, we definitely work as a team. This was another dimensional type art project that was done in collaboration with Vincent Wagner in terms of thinking through, okay, we got dimensionality and time, but let's, what are the materials? What's the effect of time? What else can we do? And that kind of experimental approach and interest in technology and interest in asking a lot of what if questions spans to the early days of my career. This is the work that I was doing when I was in university, when I was an undergrad, and what I was doing back then was a lot of installation and large built environments, hacking and readapting technology for different uses, and just a lot of asking like, what if society worked this way? What would happen if you take this premise to its logical conclusion? What would happen if you serve an interruption at one place or another? What kind of poetry or breaks or other paths could you potentially take? So that is a lot of the early work that I was doing. And then the other space that I would have my art practice would be around the table, as supper clubs or dinner theater or kitchen pop-ups in galleries and art spaces. And I found that as a nice way to, again, like in my continual wanting to ask, what if, and understand the world and society that is around us, I found the table as a nice place where if you introduce food and introduce pleasure, you're sometimes able to ask tougher questions and get into deeper conversations and get a little like, because you have that base of pleasure, you have that base of, you're there for a certain duration, so you're able to have deeper conversations. So this is from an installation that we did in Oregon, and then a supper club that we had in Brooklyn, and we're also doing these in Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit and other art spaces. So some through line threads and a very broad practice. I actually got into type design as a practical solution after I moved to New York, in terms of doing a lot of these bigger stage spaces was not always practical without a large studio and a truck and certain parameters that were not as easy in New York. So I needed to work smaller, and type became a solution to that. That it was small and could fit on a thumb drive, and I could kind of dive into it. This is from another pre-release typeface diode, which we did for WeWork, and this one we got to read at 4 points on a retina screen, which I was super happy and proud of. You can read it slightly smaller than Georgia, which was my personal little metric bar that I was trying to get to. And as you can see in the slide, so what we do as a type foundry and as a type practice is we draw a lot Latin, but we're also experts in Cyrillic and do a lot of multilingual, multi-script research and understanding just how you adapt for different regions and different languages is another big part of our practice. These are some of the typefaces that I have drawn on or been involved in over the years. Type design is by nature also a very collaborative practice. So these are relay races, and I just kind of played one part, but was really glad to be involved in these projects. Let's see. And this is a poster from, this was for Best Made Company. We did a typeface Corsair for them, and this was for a promotional poster when it was released through Rosetta Type Foundry. And then doing a lot of type, we also, of course, people would come to us for a lot of logos and getting a logo just right or refining. So that's another way that we collaborate. And a lot of these collaborations would be with, sometimes it's direct with clients, sometimes it's other design studios. So another way to kind of engage with the design and creative community. This was a logo for Sandwich and Provision Place in Brooklyn for Harbor Space University's diploma and a few others. This was in collaboration with Out of Office, which is a wonderful design studio. And then occasionally we would also take on full branding projects, which again was fun because it got me back to building big and getting that full scale gradation in terms of thinking through logos and how things show up on object or interior exhibition design, big fold outs, innovative web layouts that we did for Light and Ladder, Sweet House. And then one of the things that I've been starting on or looking at for the last couple of years is going and thinking through and researching architecture and sustainable building development practices, and really considering and asking questions about our relationship to where we live and to the land. So that is the creative and art direction part of my practice. And now I'll talk a little bit about the community side of my practice after drinking a little more water. Water is wonderful. So I'm a member of ATypI, and I've been a board member of AIJ New York, where I was involved in helping curate and put on New York design events. And I've been a board member of ATypI, where jumped around a lot of different committees and wore different hats, but was also helped curate their tech talks. And then on the other side of the established official long-standing organizations, I've also been very actively involved in a lot more of the newer, more informal groups such as Alphabets, Ladies Get Paid, Ladies Wine and Design, Queer Design Club, and Hundreds Under 100. So as we get into talking about community and the role of organizations, I think there's interesting things to talk about in those kind of two groups. For the Type Directors Club, one of the things that we did was a lot of partnerships. We did a lot of or multiple events with the Poster House in New York, such as this holiday party. At the initiative of Creative Media, I collaborated with Amber and Poster House to put on this exhibit of women in digital design and their relationships to the fonts and the way that they market their fonts specifically. It is currently up, so if you are swinging by New York, stop by, check it out. It'll be up until I think early November, and there's a lot of great other exhibits currently up as well. So it is a wonderful space and institution to check out. We also put on Edition, which was the Native North American typography, and really kind of putting to the forefront and passing over the microphone to a lot of Indigenous Native practitioners. And so we did the conference, and we got 3 years worth of scholarships available through Google. And again, with the help of Google, all of the talks are available for free on YouTube, so you can go in, search Edition, check them out. The workshops and some of the other community stuff is not online, but all of the presentations are, and they are very much worth checking out in terms of expanding and shifting the perspective on how we think about type, language, and design. And that got great response all around. So that was very proud of the work that we did there, and also want to credit Neben Southall of the Native Graphic Design Project, who was a collaborator and would not have been made possible without them. We also put on a Latin American type conference, and are in the process or curated Latin American Indigenous type conference to again keep talking to and hearing from different communities. And the Latin American one also got really great enthusiasm and response, and we had different like pop-up in-person parties to go along with it. So it was a really wonderful experience. And then I also oversaw the TDC 69 competition. A couple of the things that we did there was we introduced lettering as a discipline, And we also shifted the way that we perceive and talk about it for this one. TDC's slogan used to be typographic excellence, which we moved away from that and to talking and thinking about it in terms of the shape of language. So it became less about hierarchy and trying to understand what is excellence and from who, and more about this is a talking about it also less about as a competition and more as a showcase. So it's really about celebrating the range and the diversity that we see out there and learning from and through that. And then again, going back and forth between the official organizations and this kind of more collective way of working. I am also a member of the Inscript Collective. And as part of that, we put on the Inscript Experimental Tape Festival last year. It was all virtual. It was 5 days, 30 speakers. We got just under 1,300 attendees and a lot of love and enthusiasm. And as part of Inscript, it's really focusing on experimentation, and a lot of it is focusing on technological experimentation. So there were a lot of people talking about the overlap of type and AR, VR, AI, creative coding, physical computing, but also innovative use of craft and innovations in terms of thinking, or what can type be and how can it work. And we're, again, super excited with the response to that. Part of it was also working in this collective fashion and making it super accessible and super easy to attend. So everything is virtual, it's global. For this year, it's again going to be super cheap and affordable. It's just $30 for the 5 days, 30 speakers. It's $1 per speaker. It's going to happen again in October 4th and 8th. You are seeing the very first time someone saw a preview of the slow website effect, that when you actually go to the website or use it live, it will respond to your speech and react accordingly. And that is about to be launched. So I would very much follow and attend, again, to see some of the lineup, and it's going to be quite fire this year. And then in addition to all of that, I also speak and write about design, which you can see some of that here, and put together research projects. And then the other two things that I think a lot about and will also write about is education and climate change. So that is also things I've written about, and I also teach various things. So we are now wrapping up to my self-introduction. Now you kind of understand a little bit just the directions I come from, which might give perspective in terms of how I think or frame questions, or why I'm sometimes saying what I am. And now I kind of want to start off this conversation in terms of the great prompt that I got from Hello Departures, in terms of imagine a liberated design practice and education outside of systems of oppression. What do we need to unlearn, explore, do, transform, and reprogram to rethink design? This is stuff that I have spent a lot of time thinking about. So I will throw out a couple initial thoughts and prompts, and then I really hope this transitions into a full dialogue and a conversation where we can explore and figure this stuff out together, because I definitely think this is, again, needs to be a super collaborative process. So one of, like in terms of starting, like if we're, rethinking design, one of the questions is, what is design? Where does it come from? How did it start? And I'm guessing this is a room of designers. And currently it's, it's like arranging of mostly flat forms, or maybe it's service design and thinking through customer journey towards the elimination of friction. Or even if we go into like design thinking and it's, getting into the rooms of middle and upper management. And one of the things that for me is kind of going back and being like, where did the profession come from? How did it start? How did it evolve? And what were the kind of those trends? Because I feel like that answers a lot of the things for me in terms of where it should go next. And in my understanding, design as a profession really started and kind of goes hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution. Because before that, what you had was craftspeople, or people that fabricated. So you had, whoever makes the chair figures out the design of the chair, because the production is hand production and it happens in the same room, same body. It's not a distinct process. And same for if you're making a sign, or if you're making type, it was really just kind of more isolated and limited and very much tied to the end product. And it was a lot like with the Industrial Revolution that you start getting the separation where design is able to become its own career that you can study and practice and become. So I think that tie is interesting to think about, where design as a profession comes at the same time that the managerial class as a profession or as a route kind of comes out, and actually also the university systems as we think about and as we have them today. So there's a lot of things that really pivoted at that moment, which is interesting. And this is also like, there's a lot of other like really different tie-ins. Like that is also why we have grades. Like you can get an A to an F in school, and it actually comes from the exact same system that's why we have grade A eggs. So there's a lot of like the way that society kind of reformed all around that time. And for me, this is really relevant because I think when you're trying to think of how to unlearn, transform, decolonialize something, it's really important for me to understand, like, is this a process that is a long evolutionary process that was corrupted? Is it like, how far do you peel back that onion layer, or is this something that was created to drive this way from the very beginning, and it is just following the natural path that it was set on? We'll have a little bit of my notes in terms of what I wanted to touch and thinking through how deep I want to go down some of these alleys. I also think that, yeah, like if we look at that era of the start of the Industrial Revolution, the start of design, you have spaces, you have a lot of the practical sprouting up, but you also have some of these utopian spaces in terms of Bauhaus, of Kutamas, or Black Mountain College. And looking at the thinking that came out of there was this really utopian view of design, like this is gonna bring equality, and because of this kind of separation and because of design, all of a sudden everyone's gonna be able to afford to buy a chair. And then from that utopian thinking, you end up in the consequence of where we are today, where all of those chairs are now mountains of landfills, ocean fills, etc., piles of trash, and leading to the climate collapse situation and expediting it that we're in today. And to me, that is something that I keep in mind as a designer or someone that thinks about or tries to offer solutions in terms of keeping that amount of humility and that inquiry in terms of like, okay, but what does happen if this really works at that scale? And so to me, there is, when I think about that, of if you take, one single thing of like, okay, it's cheaper to produce a chair, now more people can have them, and then you take it to this logical extreme that warps and becomes this other thing on the other end, So for me, a lot of design solutions in terms of what do we need to learn, explore, do, transform, and reprogram is thinking about design in an aggressively decentralized form. Because to me, like, if centralized design as an industry is inherently colonial, and that kind of centralized decision making, then aggressive decentralization can be a path towards solutions. So that is one of the paths that I've not super eloquently here, apologies, but I've come to, and so that is my approach to things. So it's a lot of like questioning and reconsidering defaults in terms of how they came here. It's having humility and questioning, and anything that seems like too simple or too direct of a solution, anything that seems like a global solution. And so for me, a lot of this, diversity and decentralization is something to both practice and to learn from. And one of the things that I also think about when it comes to this is there have been studies done that linguistic diversity is linked to biodiversity, like the same regions that still have a lot of linguistic diversity are also the ones where the nature around them is really thriving. So again, like, perhaps that is what we need to go back to or reintroduce. And now that I've kind of said some things that kind of might make sense and go around in circles, I'll switch it to conversational form so we can further see what's there. This is the transition to the conversation. And I believe that in this webinar, this conversation is going to be private. So for anyone watching this after the fact, this is where you can find me to continue the conversation, or you can comment below. I'm sure wherever this is posted, they want you to follow and subscribe. So do that, and let's keep the conversation going.